Welcome to this week's edition of Blue Talk. Again, John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Ireland's defeat to France last weekend, all the other Six Nations action. Look forward to our game against the Dragons on Friday night, and have a quick look at the other Pro 14 games as well. So, lads, 15-13 defeat to France, but it could have well have been more. I thought that scoreline was a bit generous to us.
Yeah, were we playing last weekend? I thought
only without the ball.
I didn't think we were. I thought we were in some way. Yeah, okay, if we'd have won it, it would have been burglary. But I wouldn't say we didn't deserve to win it. Yeah, maybe it could have gone either way. Maybe we could have been buried with a few scores, but I think we stood up pretty well considering all the shit that happened to us, you know. It's always galling to lose. And we've never lost two opening games in the Six Nations previously, so that's a stat you don't want to know about. I suppose it kind of shows you where Ireland have come in the Six Nations as opposed to the Five Nations, because in the Five Nations, I'd say pretty much nearly every year we lost our first two games because we didn't have Italy to keep us honest. But yeah, the game itself, I thought they were going to run away with it early, but when we did fight back, there was a few reasonable performances in there. There was, a couple of things to look at that going forward. But overall, what does it tell us after a year of Andy Farrell and Mike Catt? I don't know that we've learned a huge amount. I don't know if we've progressed our game. I don't know if I see a few people criticising the lack of attacking flair, and we're the lowest offloading team in the competition by a mile. So, yeah.
Ironically, if we'd offloaded one less time, we might have won a match.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was as we like to say, the cure tag of a performance. It was good in parts. We were really good. Our pack was excellent. The impact of Paul O'Connell has been immediate. Our line out has gone from being, a chuck it and see affair to being something that looks really well marshalled. Our defensive line out looks really, really good as well. Not just in terms of the ball we're winning, but in the choices we're making when to attempt to win the ball. I think we got unlucky once or twice with penalties that, could have gone either way, but you could argue that they were penalties, certainly. I thought our rucking was good. Our scrum was excellent. Our scrum was really, really good. And then you look at the whole thing and you think about the team and you think, well, maybe there was as many as 6 first-choice players absent from that team. And the idea that, I know certainly for us who grew up watching Irish rugby in the 80s and 90s, the idea that an Irish team could get within a couple of points of France in the first place, and then to do so without a lot of first choice players, is something that, would be unimaginable in those days. And now there's disappointment that we lost the game, despite the absence of so many players. Now, I'd argue that maybe not all of them should have started, but the coaching team certainly would have started the likes of Peter O'Mahony, Jacob Stockdale, Caelan Doris, James Ryan, the 2 half-backs. So there are guys missing there. On the whole, like I say, the cured egg. But I mean, John mentioned Mike Catt there. I don't think it's the possibility of the attacking play. It's the fact that there doesn't appear to be any shape to it whatsoever. I mean, in that last 5-minute period when we were trying to get up the pitch to score a drop goal,
there was scandals.
Yeah, we just kept going backwards and backwards and backwards. We weren't even trying to, at that stage, we weren't trying to score a try. We were trying to get field position. And we weren't even able to do that. We weren't able to maintain position, let alone gain ground. We ended up losing ground. We started on the 10, and we ended up back on our 10 before we turned over the ball. So it's that kind of thing where you're not able to, the game of rugby is all about, it was developed on the playing fields of England to prepare young men for the British military. And it's about gaining ground, it's about holding ground, and then it's about gaining more ground. And we weren't gaining ground, we were losing ground. We weren't holding ground, we were losing ground. So, you know, we were kind of running contrary to everything rugby was about or invented for. But there were good performances. There were good performances again from players who looked to have performed well against Wales as well. So it's good to see players are in form. But at the end of the day, we lost by 2 points at home, which is never really that satisfactory. And we've lost 2 games at home, or lost 2 games in the Six Nations, which is never that satisfactory. And we're left really in a position where we have to win our remaining games. Okay, we've got the Italy game, should win that. Scotland game, and the England game is the England game. So Farrell has no wiggle room left at all this season to come out of it with. And I'm not talking about credit with supporters or anything. I'm talking about with credit with kind of what his goals would have been at the beginning of the season in terms of what the union would have expected of him.
Credit in the bank, more important than anything.
Money in the bank.
That's what I mean. That's the most important thing with the way COVID has destroyed all revenue for rugby. Apart from the Six Nations, pretty much. I can't see there being a huge amount coming to the provinces from. Obviously, they'll have sponsorship, but I can't see a huge bit coming from the Pro 14, and the Heineken Cup might not even finish. Who knows?
There's no way the Rainbow Cup is going ahead now. No way whatsoever. Not with the all the stories about South African strains, etc. I mean, there's so little money in the game at the moment. Super Rugby Australia kicks off tomorrow, and there's no TV deal in Europe. Literally nobody in Europe is willing to spend money to show the games. And this is Super Rugby we're talking about. This is one of the blue chip competitions. So
But like just returning back to the game itself, I mean, like I think that, you know, I think you're trying to make excuses for the team. After 41 minutes, when Billy Burns went off injured, 6 of the 7 backs were from Leinster. And I mean, can you honestly say that they played with any continuity in the 39 minutes of the second half? I mean, like, I've seen better passing in the under 12 girls that I coach. I mean, some of the passes that they were flung out were hitting guys inside shoulders. They were going above their head. Like, it's just a skills deficit. We saw both Billy Burns in the first half and Gary Ringrose in the second half absolutely ignore overlaps. They had 4-1 and a 3-1, and they ignored it. And they both went to kick. Like, that's the first instinct they've been told to do, is to kick the ball. Like, you're not going to win a match playing that with that.
I would take you to one thing you said, Jason. It's not a skills deficit. The skills are there because we see them when they play for Ulster, Leinster, and Munster.
We do.
So it's not a skills deficit. It's, like we said, it's a coaching deficit, because they're going. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you talk about 6 and 7 backs playing for Leinster or come from Leinster, but they weren't playing for Leinster,
No.
and they weren't playing the Leinster system with the Leinster coaches. They were playing for Ireland with the Irish attack coach, and I think that's a significant difference. I mean, I don't want to be going on about my cat. My cat was a guy I liked as a player. I mean, I always enjoyed watching him, but as a coach, he didn't have a huge amount of pedigree coming into it, and he's not shown a huge amount in the job. And all the things you say about, you know, look, players are simple animals. They need to go onto the pitch knowing what they're going to do and believing in what they're going to do. And I don't believe that the Irish players, and I'm not saying that he's lost the dressing room or anything like that, not like that, but I don't believe that they think that they don't seem to understand what he wants of them, or what he wants of them just isn't going to work.
Yeah. Like, there was one piece of play, it was up the near sideline, where there was a bit of an interchange between Gibson Park and Lowe. And we see that, you know, at least 2 or 3 times every game when we watch Leinster play. We see stuff that's off the cuff, but everyone around it reacts, and they run into spaces to give them options to make the pass. The 2 lads combined excellently, and they made 30, 40 meters, but there was no one else seemed to be intuitively reacting that, oh God. So it was like, well, this isn't part of the script. who ripped up the script? Because no one reacted to it, and as a result, they ended up being pushed into touch, and we saw like plays during the game when there was things that were on. As I mentioned, there was certainly two. I think there was probably a few more overlaps created, or even when we were coming out of like there's box kicks, but after the third phase of a box kick, there's no one putting any pressure on the French fullback, who was brilliant, but there was no one putting. He looked brilliant because we made him look brilliant. There was no one putting any pressure on him. I mean, there's some positives in the game, as you say. The lineout was a remarkable improvement. Scrum looked extremely solid. At one stage, we put them under a lot of pressure, 5 or 10 meters out from the line in the far corner. I'm not sure. It looked to me that there was a hand in the back of the.
Yeah, I thought so as well. That they had to fiddle it back.
And it was reset. I thought the referee missed it, but I wasn't sure if it was the number 8 taking it out or if it was second row.
No, I think it was the second row tapping it back.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But anyway, regardless of that, but it's a remarkable improvement over a couple of weeks of Paul O'Connell's involvement. But like, we're still making fundamental errors in defence. We saw it against Wales, and we saw it again when we're leaving big gaps for players to run through, and it just looks like a team that doesn't have a philosophy and doesn't have a set plan to work to. And it's incredible to think that this time 2.5 years, or this time 2 years ago, we were kind of saying, well, we're after beating the All Blacks. We're on for a Grand Slam here, and obviously we're going to win the World Cup. And now, I mean, we're kind of saying, well, we need all our big guns playing in 2 weeks' time against Italy to guarantee that result.
Yeah, I think you raised a couple of interesting points there, particularly about defense. I mean, the problem with the defense isn't the system; it's people making individual errors. We've seen it from Lowe. We saw it from Gibson Park on Saturday, and it's a weird one because I would suggest that certainly, well, maybe not Lowe. He's a perpetual shooter. But Gibson Park, I'd say for Leinster, would have stayed out because he would have trusted Ruddock to take Fiku. But because he wasn't as trusting in the system, because it's not one he's as used to as the Leinster one, he saw Fiku get a step outside Ruddock and panicked and stepped in, and then that was that. So, I mean, it's individual errors, not necessarily systemic errors. But the rest of the stuff you say is right. But we're in a situation now where the coaches are faced with a choice. They can either panic for the game against Italy and bring back all the big guns, right? And that's fair enough. I mean, it's an away match, blah, blah. Or they can stick with what I'm sure was their original plan. And that would have been to blend some guys in for the game against Italy. And I think that's still the best strategy.
Yeah, I'd love to see everybody'd love to see the likes of Harry Byrne getting a run.
I'd say nobody has done more to damage Harry Byrne's career than all the people who are calling for Harry Byrne. It's like he's the Wes Hoolahan of Irish rugby. Coaches get a thick on. Coaches get a thick on if people keep telling them to pick a guy. So, lads, if you want to see Harry Byrne playing for Ireland, shut the fuck up.
Me told.
No, but I'm serious. I mean, look at it. I mean, it's just like, I mean, there's this perception out there that Ireland don't play young players, which isn't actually true. I think we put that to bed, and that France picked them because they had no fucking choice in the matter. But at the same time, we're in a situation now, coming into the game against Italy, it would be the ideal time to give Harry Byrne a go. His brother has gotten the game. Billy Burns has gotten the game. It hasn't really worked out for him. Although I do have to say, I thought the coach was really, really brave and showed that's the kind of thing that squads love coaches for, when they stand by players in adversity. And I thought the coach stood by Billy Burns really well. But this would be a game I'd like to see Harry Byrne get a run in. But whether the coaching staff will do so, I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether they do skip that generation. They're obviously, we have to sort of future plan for Sexton. He's 35. Yeah. Rumor is he signed a 1-year deal now. It hasn't been made official yet, but we'll see. But like they've tried 3, possibly 4 if you count Joey Carberry, but he hasn't been around for the last nearly 15 months since the World Cup.
He's about to play, I think. He's about to make a comeback any day.
Yeah, he's been in a few articles during the week, all right, but
He's up to
not
his
sure
training
how
mode.
he's training. He's like, I'm not sure if he's ready to tug out on Saturday for Munster. But from an Irish point of view, we've given Billy Burns 5 caps, Jack Carty 10 caps, and Ross Byrne 12 caps. So all those guys are, Billy Burns is 26, Jack is 28, and Ross is 25. So like they're no spring chick, like they're kind of halfway through their career. And like they've had opportunities, but none of them have grasped it.
No, they're players. And that's it.
They are, and like, I mean, look, 2 of them are from our club, so the two Burnses, like, we want to see them succeed, but like, is it time now that he just says, well, I'm going to skip a generation, because those 3 guys that I've mentioned aren't ever going to be good enough to drive us to Grand Slam or championships. But if you bring in someone young, whether it's Harry Byrne or there's a plethora of other young guys, bring them through now and say, do you know what? We're after losing 2 games. This championship is done. We're only just going to be in the also-rans. But if you give them some game time now, they can learn from that. And if you play Murray, just say you play Murray and you bring in Harry Byrne and give him 3 games, but you bring in Murray and you say to Murray, guide him through, look after him. I mean, I remember seeing that when Jackson was there, and someone took him. I think it was Redden actually took him under his wing.
Took a lot of the
France. Sorry.
Took a lot of the in-game kicking off him, and
and he just kind of took a lot of the pressure off him. And if they kind of gave him a minder for those couple of games and just said, look, we obviously want to go out and win them. We kind of need to win them from financial viewpoint. But if they brought him through this time next year, they could be challenging for a championship, because they might have the autumn series also under his belt, and Sexton could be there to guide him as well. Instead of flogging a dead horse with the 3 guys that are currently vying it out, but they've all been given a chance, as I said, and not really grasped it. And like, you would question whether or not they're tip top. Are they like, if you think about it, we've had a guy who went on 3 Lions tours, and then another guy who went on 2 Lions tours as our out half for the last 20 years. Like, that's the standard. One of those guys was World Player of the Year. Those 2 fellas I've mentioned, O'Gara and Sexton, have won 6 European Cups and 2 Grand Slams.
Yeah,
I don't think the other 3 are going to.
And Rog has won Player of the first 15 years of the Heineken Cup or whatever as well.
Precisely.
Yes, you'd have to, but again, the financial stranglehold that the IRFU have always been about winning games. Let the future look after itself. We don't have the luxury.
Let's just point out, by the way, that the IRFU are concerned about the financials, not to buy more gold top walking sticks for themselves. They're concerned about the financials because it's the Irish team that pays for all the rugby in Ireland, right down to Jason's under 12 girls all the way up. So they have to be concerned about the financials, because an underperforming national team financially is an existential threat to the game at the lowest levels.
Yeah,
but
we're not France. We're not.
No, I'm just saying, like, we're not accusing them of being greedy or anything.
No, but there's a counter argument of that if you just say, well, it's all about winning our next game, at some point that run of success, if you don't keep investing in what's below it, and I'm not talking about the under 12 girls, I'm talking about investing in the next guy who's going to fill the jersey on the national team. If you don't, then all of a sudden Sexton gets Sexton gets kaput and we see there's this massive deficit, you have to bring somebody up to his standard.
Yeah.
And we've given 27 caps to those three guys I've mentioned, and they haven't, on any one of the days that those fellas have played, they haven't performed in that green jersey.
Well, look, I don't expect anyone in the Irish system to come up to either the standards of Rog or Sexton, right? That's a huge expectation. But you look at the three guys you've named, they're not at Paddy Jackson's level, right? If we could get a guy to come up to Paddy Jackson's level, we'd be doing okay. And they're not. So now we have to look at the next guy. I mean, they're all very good players for the province. They're all really, really good functional players who are really good in the Pro 14, pretty good in Europe. But they're not capable. We've seen now, as Jason said, they've had 27 caps to show, and they're not going to make that next step. So it's time to look at the next generation, whether it's Ben Healy or whether it's Harry Byrne or whether it's whoever, Michael Lowry up in Ulster or whatever. So we have to do that. I'm not sure they will. I'm not sure that the coach will have the, I don't want to use the word courage, but determination to do so against Italy.
Permission.
Huh?
You won't have the permission.
Well, I'm not sure if he will against Italy. But it'll be interesting to see how Harry Byrne gets on this weekend, because he's playing in a very difficult game. Dragons are a decent enough team who, they're dogged and they're hard. The conditions are going to be poor because the Dragons pitch makes Donnybrook a couple of years ago look like the lush pampas of Argentina.
Well, they've got.
He's going to have to show a bit of intestinal fortitude and mental fortitude on tomorrow night, and that may work in his favor for in terms of selection for the following week.
We'll come back to the Leinster game in a little bit. Just want to tease out a little bit more, but I'm not really calling for them to bring in 14 new caps against Italy. You know what I mean? I don't expect them to start.
I don't know if we have them at this stage with the injuries.
Well, maybe not, but I'm sure, I'm just saying our number one issue is the out half position.
Yeah.
And that has to be tackled and approached. We can limp on for another season. And then it's going to be critical because Sexton will be a year older this time next year. And then what do we do? We have to bite the bullet now, and we have to grasp them. I'm going to mix lots of metaphors, but we have to grasp the nettle and say we've lost our opening two games. We're not in an arse's roar winning this championship. Let's go for it and blood one new player, the out half, and give him the remaining three games against Scotland, Italy, and England. And England might maybe even bring back in a more experienced player to take on England, because obviously they're, a more powerful side.
I think what we have to do is we have to make that commitment, all right, Jason, whether it's Harry Byrne or Ben Healy or whoever it is. And then we have to stick with them, strap up their ankles and delete WhatsApp from their phones.
Yeah.
Because, we went down this road and we thought we were covered. We thought, okay, we've got Sexton, we have Paddy Jackson behind him, and then push, Paddy Jackson's gone. And then we thought, well, it's okay, we have Sexton, and we've got Joey Carberry behind him, and then push, Joey Carberry is gone. So, in fairness to various Irish coaches, their future planning for out half has been destroyed by stuff completely out of their control. But we need to start again. We just need to, and I think, much and all as I like those three players with their 27 caps, I think that we've seen that they're not going to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
On the other hand, just to talk about young players who are doing it, Hugo Keenan, what?
Yeah.
Very good. You think he might, I'm not sure if the Lions tour will go ahead, but if it does go ahead, I'd say he could be
a bolter,
penciled in to the departure lounge.
He could be a bolter. It's a position of a lot of strength actually at the moment. You've got Stuart Hogg, who's playing really, really well. You've got Elliot Daly, who's a very good player. Maybe not playing so well, but a very, very good player. You've got Halfpenny, who is playing well, and you've got Liam Williams in Wales. So there's and then I mean there's no guarantee that even the Keenan will be the Irish fullback when Stockdale comes back or Larmour proves his fitness or whatever. So, but you know, I to a certain extent, I always hated it when Sky made every single game about the Lions tour, and you know how much I love the Lions, but I always hated the way Sky made every single game about the Lions tour. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just delighted that Hugo Keenan is playing so really, really well for Ireland at the moment. He's looking like himself and Lowe and Earls patrolled the backfield really well last weekend.
Yeah, there was a bit of cover there. I just think he looks so natural. So
he is a natural fullback.
He's got that kind of Gervin Dempsey, Rob Kearney kind of ability to be places, and he's such a he's not the biggest guy in the world, which is kind of an advantage when you've got to cover a lot of ground at fullback. But he's really committed, and he's a hard working player, and he goes for high balls, he goes for whatever he goes for it like in spades. He's never found wanting, like for example Stockdale, who can look, a ball falls on the ground in front of him and he looks at it for a couple of split seconds and then goes, oh yeah, I'm a rugby player.
Rugby ball. I should be having that.
Too late. Hugo Keenan is not a man for that. Like Hugo Keenan is the guy falling on the ball before, at somebody's feet when they're about to kick it. That's the kind of guy he is. So he gives a great stability at the back there that I just think is great. And I think he's a shoe-in for that jersey for a while. I don't care. Stockdale for me is a winger. Larmour for me is a winger. James Lowe for me is a winger. I don't think there's any other person who's as qualified at fullback in the country. But hey, I'm not Andy Farrell, and they could persevere with Stockdale at that. I know Stockdale has announced that he wants to stay there, but for me, he's shooting it out with James Lowe for the 11 jersey. So we'll see where that goes.
I think, yeah, I don't think, and I think another, just in terms of guys who came in and played well. Nice to see Rhys Ruddock do well on his first Six Nations start, unbelievable as it is. And I thought Henderson did really well coming in and taking over as captain. I thought he played really well, led the pack well. And
playing tight headlock as well.
Yeah. In mitigating, circumstances, like we're obviously John or Dave, you mentioned the perception of our first 15 and 5 or 6 lads not playing, obviously the halfbacks, Ryan, O'Mahony, etc. Those lads missing out because of injuries and suspensions. But then you have your kind of second string out half comes in. He's gone after 41 minutes. Like then you have a kind of the collision, the head-on-head collision between Church and Hendy, and they both go off. And I was only on 41 minutes. You think, God, can anything else go wrong in this game? And they showed, regardless of whether they are throwing out rubbish passes or not defending correctly or not chasing kicks or kicking away possession, one thing that team definitely has is a strong unity of purpose, because they stuck to their task. And like, this was the much vaunted French team, that are all singing, all dancing. And if you listen to every pundit, they're the best French team in 10 years or 15 years, whatever.
They are, though.
To hold them within, well, they are, I know they are, but to hold them to within 2 points, I think that was, only that Dupont flung the ball at 150 miles an hour at the second row's head. And he scored a great header Frank Stapleton would have been proud of. That would have been a try that they should have got. And like they
don't lead in the Aviva for a while anyway.
I'll see your Dupont second row header and raise you with James Lowe's foot. If that had gone the other way, that could have been a different game too.
That was actually, obviously it wasn't a try, but it was a heck of an effort. But I get what you're saying, Jason. Despite all the adversities they had, the spirit in the team is obviously very, very good. It's obviously a really together camp because they're working hard for one another. So credit to Farrell there. It has to be given. and his backroom team. So, I mean, that's something to build on. If he can get, he has the basis. He has the defense, individual errors aside, the system seems good. The forwards are playing well, but with and without the ball. If he can get that next level up, and maybe we'll see it against Italy, I don't know. Yeah. But if he can get that next level onto it, he actually has something that's really promising to work with. I mean, you look at it this way. I mean, it took Joe Schmidt 4 or 5 games to really get Leinster where he wanted them. So Cat's really, that was my Cat's 5th game with Ireland.
It's more than that. But last season and the autumns as well.
Was he in for the Six Nations last season?
I thought he was in from.
You could be right, but it's not a huge amount of time. He hasn't been in for a huge amount of time.
It's been very disjointed, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been very disjointed. So, I mean, one has to give them some kind of free pass there, but not for much longer.
Anyway, okay, so we'll park the Ireland game. Let's move on quickly and just discuss the England-Italy game. What was your views on the try, on May's try, boys?
Nigel Owens, who's a referee I normally admire immensely, said it wasn't a try, it was against the laws. And then when he was asked to say which law it was against, he couldn't, because it's not against any of the laws. So then he switched to saying it was against one of the guidelines. And when he was asked which guideline it was against, because these are on the World Rugby site, he couldn't, because it's not against any of the guidelines. There is nothing in the laws of the game that say you're not allowed to jump out of a tackle. Nothing. You might get done for dangerous play, but that's an outcome thing rather than the actual event itself. There was nothing wrong with what he did under the laws of the game.
I thought you weren't allowed to jump.
No law whatsoever against jumping out of a tackle.
Okay.
If only I had known that 20 years ago.
I mean, you could get done for, if he clipped your man with his knee, he could have got done for dangerous play. But that's an outcome based. But dangerous play is based on the outcome, not on the intent.
What happens if the defender came across and hit him while in the air? Is that technically hitting?
I would consider it a
sort of an ambiguous.
I consider it a rugby incident. If the guy was in the air and the other guy was in the air and he's tackling when going for the line, then that's a rugby incident.
Okay. Do you think, Matt, that Italy sometimes get a little bit harshly treated?
Yes.
In some decisions?
Yes.
I mean, like the Adamson, the referee,
Matt Hancock.
I saw him reffing Northampton Saints away to Treviso in the European Cup. It was probably about 15 months ago. And he was so harsh to Treviso that day. In fact, I think he gave a penalty in the last couple of minutes to deny them victory.
Yeah, that was for speaking Italian or something, wasn't
it? Wearing a loud shirt in a build-up area.
But like, regardless of whether the May incident, right? I mean, like, to say, I always thought the jumping in a tackle, only because I've heard it on TV or been, seeing somebody do it and then him being penalized for doing it. But like the Farrell incident, was it Willis's try where they actually picked him up and drove him over the line, where it wasn't a try when he was grounded, but he was driven over. But like, is he not? But there was like, they're probably getting technical. Any other incidents that they seem to get really unfairly treated, that other teams either get away with or they're not penalized as severely as Italy are.
Part of the whole Johnny May try thing. There were a million other examples of where referees where the referee, I thought, was refereeing to what he expected the outcome to be. I'm not saying, I mean, there was no conscious bias or anything like that, but he expected Italy to be offside, so he gave penalties for offside, and he wasn't giving them against England because why would they need to be, kind of thing. There was a lot of kind of outcome bias or predetermined outcome bias in the refereeing, and that's been happening to Italy now for 2 or 3 years, certainly at least that I can recall, where they have been pinged for things that nobody else is getting pinged for.
Yeah, there's a bit of there's a bit of language barrier thing as well.
Yeah.
France suffer from it, and it's not even the fact that they don't understand the cause or whatever. It's just that, for example, if they're told to leave it, or they're told to, I'm sure all teams have a rudimentary grasp of English enough to know the basics, but they don't get it. There's lots of issues. There's coaching. There's loads of things that it affects that you don't really think about. And most of the rugby world is English speaking. New Zealand, South Africa, the 4 home nations, as they call them, and that they all speak English natively, whereas France and Italy don't. So that's actually yet another disadvantage for them.
I remember Martin Castro taking umbrage with Wayne Barnes being praised for speaking French. He pointed out there's as many tier 1 teams in Europe who speak Italian as speak French. Why doesn't Wayne Barnes learn Italian?
It's true enough, but just going back to our game, the referee seemed to be bilingual for the entire match, which is a departure, because it's
his French was pretty decent, actually.
Yeah, no, it was, and I saw him. I thought every referee's going to make mistakes, but I saw him refereeing. I think it was Racing against Toulouse in a Heineken Cup quarter-final, and he was absolutely excellent. I think he disallowed a try towards the end of it, but it could have reigned confusion, but it didn't. He handled the situation exemplary well, even though the Racing crowd were on his back and putting pressure on him to make that decision in favour of Racing. He in fact went back and handled the situation, calmed it down, and made the correct call that it wasn't a try. But
and that was despite 30 Frenchmen pretending not to understand a word he was saying to them in French.
No doubt.
Well, I say
but it's good to see. Italy, okay, they were well beaten by England 41-18, but a couple of scores at the end kind of exaggerated the scoreline. But Italy are far more competitive this year, and they've given youth their chance in a few positions.
The 2 halfbacks,
20 and 21 years of age. I just had a look back over the last 3 seasons, under 20s results. Italy have, they've won games.
Yeah,
they're not. Yeah. If you had probably asked people, how are Italy? How do they do at under 20 levels? You would just presume that they do as poorly as they do at men's level. In 2018, they won 2 of their matches. They beat Scotland and Wales. 19, they beat Scotland. In 20, there was only 3 games. They beat Wales. So, they are.
And they're a tough side to play against.
That
Italian under 20 team, they're a tough side to play against.
Actually, while I was looking at those results, the Irish results at under 20 level is quite remarkable. Over, I think it's 16 years they've been playing it at, and we've won, I think it's 2 Grand Slams and 3 Triple Crowns, which is pretty good going.
And we were robbed of back-to-back Grand Slams because of COVID.
Yeah, very unfortunate, that one. All right, but they have rescheduled those under 20 games. So
have they?
Yeah, and the women's as well. So,
but nearly every player will have aged out at this stage.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Yeah, and probably not many have played many games.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
the other game of the.
Just saying about Italy, we were saying last week that Italy would be good for an hour, and then England would probably stretch away with late tries, and that's kind of what happened. Italy played some really good rugby. They were good for an hour, and then the weight of penalties and superior English quality from 16 through 23 made the big difference. I mean, obviously, and I hope he recovers well. But having a guy like Jack Willis on the bench is a huge thing. I mean, that's a player that would be a starter for almost any other country.
Yeah.
And a horrible injury, and I hope he recovers fully and comes back to where he was. But such a horrible way. I mean, it was such a high for him. 6 Nations debut, try on his debut, and then.
Yeah, shocking, that injury. Just once you hear someone screaming like that, you just know it's never any good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I suppose for the second weekend in a row, the match of the weekend featured Scotland. This time they didn't come out as winners, but certainly after 36 minutes, I thought they were going to storm away with this game. They were 17-3 up.
Wales brought on their secret player, Mr. Orr Card.
Well, now in fairness, the red card didn't come out until the 53rd minute, but like Wales came back and scored a try just before half time to make it 17-8. But like Wales had come back, I think Liam Williams scored. It was kind of a crazy 20 minutes of play. Liam Williams scored a try to make it 17-15. Then the red card came out a few minutes later. Come back to that. Then there was Wales took the lead. Wyn Jones scored to make it 17-20. Then Hogg came back. He scored a try, 24-20. And then Rhys Sammet came in and with the match winning try, make it 24-25. But I suppose Wales had shown that they were back in the game. It was, they were back to 17-15 when the red card was produced. But obviously a much harder struggle for Scotland when they only got playing with 14 men for 25 minutes.
Yeah, it was a great game of rugby, brilliant game of rugby. I mean, Scotland and Wales have served up some of the best fare in terms of entertainment in the entire tournament, in all the games so far. Yeah, I mean, as somebody on social media was joking, Wales are only 3 red cards away from a Grand Slam.
Beat me to it.
But Wales have that ability. Wales have the ability to we've seen it. We saw it for years under Gatland, that Welsh teams that didn't look all that impressive, and you're going, oh, that Welsh team will lose this game. Oh, they'll lose this game. I know they'll lose this game. And they'll get beaten here. Oh, look, they've won the Grand Slam. They kind of have that ability because I think they understand, certainly within Club Wales, how to grind their way to a Grand Slam, which sometimes you have to do. And they're a pretty decent team as well. I mean, they have a lot of good players in there. They've discovered 1 or 2 young ones like Rhys Sammet. Problem is now, what will happen when Gatland's law kicks in? Because those guys all have to come home now because their contracts are up in England. If they re-sign for English clubs, they're excluded from Welsh selection. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It'll be great for our league if they do come back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Top star players. It's great. Look, I really looking. Excuse me. Looking forward to seeing both teams in action this weekend.
Yeah.
Or next weekend. Rather.
Okay, so just moving on from Six Nations onto the
break though. No matter what happens, I mean, we're in the middle of a lockdown. People can't go to see games. Guys are injured. The season's disjointed, and yet, and people say, "Oh, it's not as good as Super Rugby. Or it's not as good as this." But in terms of actually, competitive, hard, entertaining rugby, you can't beat the Six Nations. You just can't. It is still the gold standard in world rugby.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's just a pity there's no bloody crowds there.
Yeah.
But next year there will be. So
yes.
Okay, so we take on the Dragons on Friday night. Teams have been announced. The 2 Byrne brothers feature for Leinster. Harry at 10 and his brother Ross at 12, which is interesting, to say the least. I
think that maybe they see Ross as more of a in that position. I can't see him as being much more than, or not much more than, the second, kind of playing a second 5/8 role. Maybe they see that as a role for him.
Well, he was playing 13 a few weeks ago.
He was, yeah. I mean, we are a bit stretched for numbers. I mean, if Rory O'Loughlin hadn't come back, we would have had we would have probably had to pick an embryo at outside centre. So, albeit a 16-stone, 6-foot odd embryo in the shape of Jamie Osborne.
He's on the bench. He's on the bench, though.
He is on the bench, yeah. But what I'm saying is, I mean, we are skinny on numbers, so I suppose there's a certain amount of mend and make do with the back line. But it's really interesting to see the 2 of them play together, and it's really interesting that of the 2 of the guy that's picked to play it out half, it's the younger of the 2. It's the non-international, if you like. That's the interesting thing. And as I was saying earlier, Newport can be a tough place to go. It's a tough place to go for a game. That pitch is nobody's friend. And that's it. There's a you saw that Newport team. There's a gnarly look to that team.
That team is
There's-
actually pretty good.
Gnarly
There's a few
look,
guys. There's a few guys in there that are, obviously you've poor old Bet Lynch who'll hobble around for a few minutes,
Butcher.
or Pat Butcher, whichever you prefer. Great player in his day, and he still caused teams. He hasn't got the stamina anymore, but he still caused teams some issues. But they've got that young Locke Carter is supposed to be the Puppies privates. They've got a gnarly looking front row. They've even got a reasonably decent bench. Like, this is no gimme, and it's away in Wales. That ground has Newport County playing football on it. It has Cardiff Blues also playing rugby on it currently because they're
I think they've moved back to Cardiff now.
well, yes, but it has had.
It had, yeah.
And it's got. I don't know. Are Newport still in the Welsh Premiership? Does it have to house them as well? Can't remember what happened there with that situation. But they've a lot of people playing on the pitch. Now, they spent money on the pitch a couple of years ago, but it's still not the May West.
Swamp again now.
So
it's going to need more money spent on it.
yeah, so it's not an easy place to go, and the guys who play in it regularly know the holes in the corners like a lot better than we do. And we're sending out, apart from Grandad Fardy and his younger brother Dev Toner, we're sending out some fairly callow guys. There's a lot of fellas missing that you'd fancy for a trip to, and even the fact with them, like the fact that we've got quite short locks to start. Both of them are around the 6'5", maybe scraping the 6'6", whereas you've got Toner and Fardy 6'6", and you've Toner at 6'11". There's that's your flanker and your second row replacement. So there's obviously Baird to move to flanker, Fardy to come on at flanker. There's plenty of stuff we can do. But we're going to end up with a very tall team, or a very a good mauling team, maybe a good team for the dirty wet pitch. Who knows?
Actually, the battle of the front rows is going to be fascinating, because there are two really good front rows that have been sent out, front fives that have been sent out in both teams.
Yeah.
It's going to be really,
see how Baird gets on. He was obviously away with the Irish squad. He's been released back in.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, John was saying there about Carter, and kind of like you've got two kind of young guys for the future playing in Carter and Baird. You've got two fairly gnarly guys. We've got Ross Maloney there, who's and then you've got two really good front rows. I mean, they've got Brock Harris, we've got Michael Bent, they've got Hibbert, we've got, so it's actually going to be very interesting to see which one of those gets on top. I think whichever one of those gets on top that might be the winner of the game, because they have a decent back row. We've got a really good back row. They've got some interesting backs. Some of their backs are really exciting looking. Like,
they only had 4 away with the Welsh squad.
Yeah.
So they haven't been disrupted. Whereas we had, I think it was 16 out of the 23 last weekend away with Ireland. So like they wouldn't have trained together as Leinster for the last month. The ones that were released back into Leinster, the 4 that were filtered back in, are obviously starting, but like they wouldn't have been involved with training with any of their Leinster teammates except for the last few days.
Another thing to note is that both of our sub props were born this millennium. That's pretty scary. One of them will be making his debut because, unless very, very few props do 80 minutes. So one will be making his debut. Michael Milne, I think, is injured. So he's the next cab off the rank. I don't know a whole lot about him. I do
Marcus
know
Hannon, is it?
Marcus Hannon.
Yeah. I do know a bit about Clarkson. He's a cracking.
We've seen him, and we've seen him in action. We know not to have any worries with him.
No, but still, 2 guys born this millennium in a position like prop. I mean, that's not a young man's. Generally, it's a wily experienced competitor's position rather than a young man.
I agree with you entirely, John, but here's a funny one for you. You look at the last couple of Irish tight head props, they both come through very young and survived.
Yeah, that's
in
true.
Tadhg Furlong was a young guy when he came in, and now succeeded by Andrew Porter, who's still young. So I mean, obviously the coaching is getting better. I mean, it used to be that you weren't really an adult as a prop until you were in your 30s, certainly on the tight head side. Whereas now, I don't know whether it's some kind of direct brain injection or something, but it seems to be working much better in terms of bringing through younger guys. I mean, Clarkson, we've seen Clarkson a couple of times. He's really good. Hannon was in that Irish under-20s team, unless I'm mistaken. And that scrum was pretty impressive. So, you know, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of young players on side for both teams.
I'm looking forward to seeing Dan Sheehan again. Like, anytime I've seen him, he's been pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's made for a game like this too, and he's a big lad, you know. He's very tall, and he's
like, even, you know, if we're kind of talking about, like, say, the national team and going forward, you know, I'd like to see Kelleher starting for Ireland, and Sheehan coming through as his replacement on the bench, you know. But obviously, it's games like this that Sheehan needs to get more game time, and obviously he's only coming through this season, so we need him, and probably next season before he can be challenging Kelleher for that Irish berth.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting team all around. Like, I mean, Jamie Osborne, who I think by certainly what the coach said was kind of called up in a break glass and emergency situation, seems to have made that emergency. He took his opportunity really well in that match. So I think we'll be seeing him for a bit more this season, especially with Rory O'Loughlin just coming back.
But it proves that he can operate at that level. That was, you know, that was away to Scarlets, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and like we've seen Hawkshaw had a cameo. Like, was that game as well?
Yeah, that was that game as well.
Yeah. Right. You know, like, so when these guys are still very young, but when they are given their opportunities, they can grasp it.
Yeah.
And it kind of dovetails back a little bit. I know a completely different standard and level. I'm not trying to in any way equate the two. I'm just saying that those two guys at the first rung of the ladder that they're on grabbed their opportunity. Way up the ladder, we've seen those three out halves for Ireland struggle to grasp their opportunities.
I thought you were going to start the Jamie Osborne for the Lions tour bandwagon.
No, not yet. But one lad that I think unfortunately his star might have faded a little bit with Caelan Darras, who we continue to get a bit of bad news about. Like, he's been out for the foreseeable future, was the press release over the last day or so. But maybe, you know, they always say you're only one injury away. Is a terrible news for Caelan Darras, but the guy who he kind of leapfrogged when he got injured over in Japan, Jack Conan, is earning his 100 cap for Leinster on tomorrow. But, you know, it's funny, the sort of the swings and roundabouts of professional sports. Everything was going in Caelan Darras' favour, and Jack Conan was, you know, struggling with an injury for 9 months. And now the shoe's on the other foot a little bit, unfortunately. But that's just the way things go in pro sports.
Speaking of unfortunate injuries, the news on Dan Levy that he's going to be out for the remainder of the season is very unfortunate. But I would say, I mean, it looks like it's one of those cleanup operations.
Yeah.
Better to do it now than let it get worse.
Yeah, we do it now, and then look, this season is so disrupted, and, you know, we don't know what way is going to happen with even the end of the season with you know, obviously the Pro 14 is going to be truncated in March. We don't know what's going to happen with the Rainbow Cup. Well, it might go on. Who knows what's going to go on?
I think they're going to have to extend the Pro 14 because I don't think the Rainbow Cup is. It can't happen, Jason. Not with the way things are at the moment.
Yeah,
in March, no way.
And then we have the Heineken Cup. We don't know what's going on. Well, we know what the plan is for that, but we don't know whether the French government are going to change. You know, like when you just saw that three of their coaches picked it up, and they're isolating, and some of the sevens team have got it now, and it could turn into a mess with that in France. So we don't know whether their government is going to clamp down on it. So what's going to happen with Heineken Cup games?
Very few plans survive first engagement with the enemy. I think it was Napoleon said that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well,
I don't. Rainbow Cup is gone unless they bubble them somewhere in like the Eden Project or something, and who knows. I think we'd be playing a fairly regular Pro 14 schedule for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, could be. Just looking at a couple of the other Pro 14 fixtures, the one that's most noteworthy from our point of view is Glasgow hosting Ulster also on Friday night. They could do us a nice little favour. Not sure if they will or not, but certainly if they could take a couple of points off Ulster.
I'm not sure that Glasgow seem to be a bit free-fally at the moment, don't they?
Glasgow are in a bit of trouble. Not only that, they've lost an awful lot more players to internationals than Ulster have. Ulster have got a couple back, McCluskey and one or two others. So I just can't see. You never know. Anything's possible the way things are going, but I just see Ulster having a bit much for them in their current form. We shall see.
Glasgow have a fairly, not the worst team out. I mean, you look at the guys they have. I mean, you look at they've Ollie Kebble, they've Richie Gray, Leone Nakawara, Harley, Ryan Wilson. They've Adam Hastings, Sam Johnson, and Hugh Jones available to them. They've Darcy Ray on the bench. So I mean, it's not the worst Glasgow team you've ever seen.
Well,
I'm just amazed that a man called Darcy doesn't get a massive slagging in somewhere as macho as Glasgow.
Well, he's a professional rugby player. He could probably give a guy a slap, like.
But he's surrounded by a lot of other professional rugby players who.
But Ulster have a very strong team, and fair play to Jordy Murphy been made captain.
I heard that, yeah.
Ulster have a strong team, all right. I mean, they've got a lot of their better second stream players available to them, and they have a strong bench as well, which is going to make a big difference.
Indeed.
Well, we'll see how that turns out on Friday. Saturday sees Munster travel over to Edinburgh. Again, like they're probably home and hosed. Like I think they're 10 points clear of Connacht. But it's still a tricky fixture going over to Edinburgh. Like both those sides, I suppose Glasgow and Edinburgh are fourth in their respective tables. So I guess they must be struggling to qualify for Europe next season.
Yeah.
Is it 6 that go through?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
So I think it's 6, isn't it? So so basically that would mean
there's usually a playoff for 7. I know there was 8 this year, but normally we get 7, I think, and there's a playoff between the 2 fourth places. That's my memory.
Right. Well, either way, one of them could miss out if that's the case. They'd be playing off against each other. So
yeah,
they've got it all to play. They'd have it all to play for there. So maybe they might take some points off Munster. I see Munster have released a few guys who have signed extensions to their contract.
That's the oddest way of announcing guys have signed an extension.
Yes, I know. And as I was saying it, I realised what I had said. Craig Casey got a 2-year deal. So did both the Scannells, Jack O'Donoghue and Shane Daly.
And Calvin Nash.
Yes, and then Liam Coombs got a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and Alex McKenny as well. Yeah, it's a nice bit of business done. I presume they're all the guys who are off, who are kind of out of contract and not on central deals. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the remainder of them. But yeah, it's always good going into a match with guys knowing the guys who are probably going to be playing in the game. I mean, we don't know what the selection is yet, but who have their future tied up, so they'll all be in good form.
And actually, the Connacht game, I know they're 10 points behind Munster, but only 6 points behind them are Cardiff, John's second team. So, well, I didn't say which was your second team, John, because you have said that Connacht are your real second team.
He has so many second teams. So he
Somebody
has.
once said to me that surely London Irish must be your second team. They would be my least second team.
I wouldn't be a big fan of I'd be more of a fan of the amateur club than the professional club, to be honest with you. Professional club are just not a Premiership club.
And they're London Scottish as well.
Yeah.
And Richmond. Anyway, yeah.
I think
so
Richmond and London Scottish have escaped their clasp.
But Cardiff are only 6 points behind Connacht, so they're breathing down on their heels. Yeah, so I think that's obviously that match is in Galway, so I would like to see them beating Cardiff that day.
Everybody has a game in hand over Scarlets and Cardiff, though, because they've played their round
Yes,
14.
you're right.
They played their get Liam Williams back into the Welsh team quicker game.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got that. Willis Halahollo has re-signed for Cardiff after making his Welsh debut. So I'm sure
he played well actually on Saturday.
Huh?
He played well on Saturday.
He's a good player. He is a good player. I mean, he's a good player of his type, you know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, boys, I think that's pretty much it. I just want to get a quick prediction, I suppose, before we go for the Dragons Leinster game.
Bonus point win for Leinster.
Bonus point win
Bonus
by 5 for Leinster.
Excellent.
You reckon
Nice
Dragons will get a
optimistic.
losing bonus point, do you?
I do.
That'd be so pretty much saying that they might get a bonus point themselves.
Yeah. You never
That
know.
might be rip roaring fair then, wouldn't it?
They might even get 2.
on the Quagmire in
Yeah,
Eighth grade.
eight tries at a free flowing match on
Well, anyway, boys, as ever, thanks a
hard
million. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and a like and a subscription. Thanks again, lads, and thanks a million for watching. Cheers.